If you don't pick up that pen in 30 seconds, Emma, I will make sure you lose your engineering license by Friday. Those were the exact words my mother spit across the mahogany dining table before I could even take off my coat. There was no warm greeting. There were no menu cards or glass goblets. Just a cold room inside an upscale downtown club, 3 aggressive corporate lawyers sitting under a dim chandelier, and a thick legal contract open to the final signature page. My name is Emma Megan. I am 29 years old and I work as a senior structural project manager for a major commercial infrastructure firm. For 7 years, I built my life from scratch. While my peers were taking expensive vacations, I worked 60-hour weeks, built up my investment portfolio, and bought a modest downtown commercial property that now generates stable rental income. I paid every penny of my tuition loans without a single dollar of help from my family. My family, on the other hand, operated on a completely different set of rules. My younger sister, Chloe, who is 26, has been pampered since the day she was born. My parents, Patricia and Arthur, treated her like royalty while treating me like an unpaid utility. 6 months ago, Chloe got engaged to a man from a wealthy local family. Instead of planning a celebration within her actual budget, Chloe immediately began booking luxury ballrooms, elite caterers, and high-end wedding designers. Total bill came out to $50,000. The issue was simple. My parents had zero liquid savings due to decades of bad credit decisions, and Chloe worked 15 hours a week at a clothing boutique. 3 weeks ago, my mother invited me over to her house under the guise of showing me home photos. The moment I walked into the kitchen, she pushed a $50,000 wedding estimate across the table and told me I was expected to pay for the whole event. She claimed that because I made good money as an engineer, it was my family duty to give Chloe her dream wedding. I declined immediately. I told her that while I cared about my sister, I worked hard for my financial stability and would not hand over my life savings to fund an extravagant weekend party. My mother threw a glass vase against the wall, called me an ungrateful child, and my father threatened to disown me on the spot. I walked out and limited my contact with them. Then, earlier today, my mother called my office. Her voice was remarkably soft, almost remorseful. She apologized for her behavior 3 weeks ago and begged me to meet her for a quiet dinner at a local dining club just to reset our relationship. I agreed, hoping she had finally accepted my boundary. Instead, I walked into a legal interrogation. My mother, Patricia, sat at the head of the long table, wearing a dark suit with a look of pure aggression. My father, Arthur, stood near the corner window with his arms locked tightly over his chest. Chloe was sitting near the back, idly tapping her fingernails against her phone screen, completely unbothered by the setup. To my mother's right sat 3 senior attorneys holding black leather briefcases and legal pads. "Sit down and review the terms, Emma," my father ordered from the window, his voice harsh and demanding. I remained near the doorway, keeping my hand on my handbag strap. "What is this, Dad?" The mom explicitly said over the phone that we were having a quiet dinner to move past the wedding argument. "We said whatever was necessary to get you into this room," my mother replied without a trace of guilt. "Because you clearly lack the respect to fulfill your obligations voluntarily." The lead attorney sitting beside my mother pushed a blue document folder toward the center of the table. "Miss Megan," the attorney said in a flat tone, "this is a binding financial guarantee agreement. Under these covenants, you agree to assume full responsibility for your sister Chloe's wedding contracts totaling $50,000. In addition, you will pledge your downtown commercial property as secondary security for the venue's line of credit." I looked from the document straight to my mother's eyes. "Are you serious? You hired 3 lawyers to trap me in a restaurant because I refused to buy Chloe a wedding? You have the liquidity, Emma," my father barked, stepping toward the table. "You own property. Chloe is your sister, and she's not going to look poor in front of her new in-laws just because you want to hoard your money." "I am not signing anything," I said firmly, taking a step back toward the door. "My answer is the same today as it was 3 weeks ago. No." My mother slammed her hand against the wooden table, rising out of her chair with a sharp glare. You listen to me very carefully, Patricia sneered, pointing her finger directly at my face. You are single. You have no husband, no family of your own, and no one standing behind you. We know every major contractor your firm works with. We know the board of directors at your engineering company. If you step out of that door without signing every page of this agreement, I will personally file complaints claiming you committed financial fraud against our family to buy your real estate. I will call your boss tomorrow at 8 in the morning. I will ruin your professional reputation, and I will make sure you are fired by noon. Pick up the pen or I will ruin your life. The three lawyers leaned back, resting their hands on the table, fully expecting me to break down under the weight of the threat. They truly believed I was an isolated single woman with no legal protection and no defense. What they didn't know was that my family hadn't bothered to ask about my personal life in over 3 years. They were so consumed with Chloe's life that they missed the fact that I had been dating a prominent corporate attorney for 3 years, and that we had gotten married a year ago in a quiet legal ceremony. I reached into my blazer pocket, unlocked my phone screen, and hit a quick speed dial button. I looked back at my mother with a completely calm, unbothered expression. You really think I'm standing in this room by myself, Mom? I asked quietly. Before my mother could say another word, the heavy wooden doors behind me opened wide. Walking straight into the room was a tall man in a navy suit, carrying a legal briefcase, accompanied by 2 associate attorneys carrying federal court filings. I stepped to the side as my husband walked up next to me, placing a supportive hand on my back. You told me to sign or you'd ruin me, Mom, I said smoothly, looking at my mother's suddenly frozen expression. Now meet my husband. My husband, Julian Vance, stepped to the center of the room, unbuttoning his navy blazer with complete composure. Behind him, 2 senior associate attorneys from Vance & Associates laid down 3 leather litigation binders directly on top of my mother's signed agreement, completely covering her paperwork. My mother, Patricia, blinked rapidly, her face turning pale as she looked between Julian and me. Emma, what is the meaning of this? Who is this man? My name is Julian Vance, my husband introduced himself, his voice calm, heavy, and resonant throughout the quiet room. I am the managing partner at Vance & Associates, and more importantly, I am Emma's husband. We have been legally married for over a year. My father, Arthur, stood frozen by the window, his arms slowly dropping to his sides. Chloe finally put her phone away, her mouth open in absolute shock. The lead attorney my mother had hired glanced down at the business card Julian's associate placed on the table. The moment he read the firm's name, his aggressive posture evaporated. He recognized Julian immediately. Vance & Associates was one of the top commercial litigation firms in the state. Mr. Vance, the hired lawyer stammered, adjusting his collar nervously. We were under the impression this was a private family matter regarding a financial guarantee. What you are attempting here is not a private family matter, Julian replied, leaning over the table and locking eyes with the hired counsel. This is an unconscionable contract drafted under civil extortion and third-party coercion. You brought 3 attorneys into a private dining room to threaten my wife's professional licensure and engineering reputation, unless she signed over her personal real estate equity for a wedding contract she has no legal duty to support. Julian turned toward my mother, who was clutching her handbag tightly, her hands visibly trembling. Mrs. Megan, Julian continued, pulling a set of blue-stamped court documents from his binder. Before we walked into this room, my office filed an emergency injunction with the county superior court. We have fully logged the harassing text messages, phone calls, and recorded voice notes you sent Emma over the last 3 weeks demanding $50,000. Patricia gasped, stepping back from the table. You recorded us. We are her parents. Parental status does not grant you immunity from tortious interference, Julian stated firmly. If you make a single phone call to my wife's corporate engineering firm, or if you attempt to contact a single member of her executive board with false accusations, my firm will execute a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation per se, and commercial extortion. He looked directly at the 3 hired attorneys sitting opposite us. And as for the 3 of you, If you do not withdraw your representation from this invalid agreement within the next 10 minutes, I will personally submit a formal complaint to the State Bar Ethics Board for assisting in predatory civil coercion. The lead attorney didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately closed his fountain pen, snapped his leather briefcase shut, and stood up from his chair. "We are withdrawing our legal counsel effective immediately," the hired lawyer said briskly, avoiding eye contact with my mother as he gathered his papers. "Mrs. Megan, our retainer agreement is officially terminated. You will receive our final invoice by mail." Within 30 seconds, all three of my mother's lawyers grabbed their bags and walked out of the private dining room, leaving my family standing alone in complete silence. My sister Chloe burst into tears, looking at my father. "Dad, what about my wedding venue deposit? The manager told us the contract had to be signed tonight or we lose the date." "Be quiet, Chloe," Arthur snapped. His face flushed red with humiliation as he looked at Julian and me. My mother sank back into her dining chair, all her previous confidence completely shattered. She looked up at me, her voice trembling as she attempted one final plea. "Emma," Patricia stammered, her eyes filling with tears. "You married a powerful lawyer and didn't even tell us? How could you keep something like that from your own mother? We are your family. You could have easily helped your sister with this kind of financial backing." I walked over to the edge of the table, looking down at the woman who had spent my entire life taking me for granted. "You didn't know I was married because you never asked about my life, Mom," I said in a clear, measured voice. "For 3 years, every single conversation you started with me was about Chloe's needs, Chloe's apartment, or how much money I was making. You didn't care about my happiness. You only cared about what you could extract from me." "Emma, please," my father pleaded, taking a step forward. "We made a mistake tonight. Let's sit down and talk about this like family." "No, Dad," I replied, standing beside my husband. "Family doesn't trap you in a restaurant with lawyers to strip away your hard-earned assets. Family doesn't threaten to ruin your career over a party." Julian zipped his briefcase shut and held out his arm for me. "All future communications regarding this matter will go through my office clerk. If any of you show up at Emma's office or our residence, the police will be called immediately to enforce the restraint order." I wrapped my arm through Julian's, turned around, and walked out of the private dining room, leaving my mother, father, and sister sitting in the middle of their self-made disaster. Over the next 2 months, the consequences of their actions unfolded rapidly. Without my financial backing or my real estate collateral, Chloe had to cancel the $50,000 luxury wedding package. She lost her $8,000 non-refundable venue deposit and was forced to scale down her celebration to a small, inexpensive backyard gathering. Her new in-laws, discovering that my parents had attempted to fraudulently finance the event, distanced themselves from the family dynamic entirely. My parents were forced to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket to cover the retainer fees for the attorneys they had hired to ambush me, sinking them even further into personal credit debt. Julian and I focused on our lives, building our future on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and real partnership. Before we wrap up, I want to share a quick personal lesson from today's story. At the end of the day, this situation teaches us something very important about breaking free from toxic family dynamics, recognizing your self-worth, and refusing to let anyone guilt-trip you into financial destruction. Being related by blood does not give anyone the right to view your hard work as their personal bank account, nor does it excuse malicious behavior when you set healthy boundaries. When family members treat your success with entitlement and attempt to bully you into sacrificing your future for their vanity, standing your ground is not being cruel, it is protecting your peace. Emma's journey reminds us that true family supports your growth rather than trying to drain your resources, and your real strength comes from surrounding yourself with people who honor, respect, and stand by you unconditionally.